you know. We've always financially been up and down, and we have good years, bad years. It's kind of, depending on how the funding comes in, what we're able to get, and sometimes I think the small space is a constraint for that too. But our board has this last year has really taken a hard look at the financial stability, because we want to get the center to a place that we are financially stable. So one of the things that they did last year was to decide that they wanted to start an endowment. So we worked with Heritage Fund, looked at what that would take. Heritage Fund said that normally it takes 3 years to get an endowment, to raise the money to get enough to where you can start using the endowment. The board took that very serious. They decided to have a fundraising event last year and talk to businesses in town. We were able to raise the money to open that account last year. So we raised enough money to get it going in 1 year instead of 3. This year, they're taking a look at how can we get enough money coming in so that we could have a reserve, because that's one thing that Eastside has not ever had, is that reserve, so that when you have a down year, that you have money to fall back on. So the board is taking we've worked real hard to get a strong board and good community leaders on our board that would take a strong look at that financial stability piece, and how do we get the center at that point where we could start looking at a new facility and things like that. So I guess I would say probably the strengths of the community center, number one would be flexibility, that when there is a need that arises in the community, we address that need. An example would be when the flood hit and the need was getting food to people at their homes while they were working on cleaning up their homes. And so for 6 months, we prepared meals and took out 600 meals a day to make sure that everybody had food, so that, because one of the things that we found was they didn't want to leave their home to come here to eat because they were too busy and only had a certain amount of time. So by providing them with a hot meal, they were able to work, able to be fed, able to do the things that they needed to do. Another example, we had right shortly after I started working here, we had a mother to come in and talk to me about her 3rd grade daughter, who she said was going to be expelled from school because she was flunking. I assured her that her daughter wasn't going to be expelled, but obviously that there was a problem, and her mom wasn't able to help her with her homework because her mom never graduated from high school. So I immediately contacted the high school, and we partnered her daughter with a senior to come over and tutor her after school. Well, what we realized through that was that this was not the only student, and so we started an after-school tutoring program so that we could pair students with students to help them. This child's grades increased to B pluses and A's, and she ended up doing very well, but the problem was that she just didn't have the support she needed. That after-school program grew now that the after-school programs are held in the schools, and so it was moved from here, well, then to East High School and then to Fadria, and so now the school systems are taking, and Foundation for Youth are doing those programs. So we were able to get the program up, get it going, and then turn it over to those individuals, those facilities that could take care of it. But so when needs come to us like that, then we're able to look at that need and say, okay, is that something that we can address, should address, or find somebody in the community who would be the appropriate organization to address that. But that takes flexibility. It takes being able to say, okay, maybe we need to look at this issue and address this issue, and not do this program for right now, and be able to shift things around to meet those needs. But I think that as a community center, when you have the pulse of the community and you're working with the community on a daily basis, then you're able to kind of understand what those needs are when they come up and how to get those addressed. So I think that that's probably one of our largest strengths is knowing what's going on in the community, kind of seeing trends. The foreclosure is another example. We started an IDA, an individual development account program, and through that program started working on pre-purchase housing counseling. So we were already training our staff to do housing counseling, and so when we started hearing about foreclosure and seeing that that was going to be a problem, we were able to get our staff trained quickly and be ready when the problem hit so that we could start addressing that issue. And so then the state contacted us and said, we're going to be starting a program to address the foreclosure problem. You have trained counselors. Would you be interested in doing foreclosure counseling? So by being able to kind of to keep up with what's going on in the state, in the community, and being able to be able to look at those and say, okay, here's the trend, kind of like with life skills that we're doing right now. People are starting to kind of have a shift back that, we're wanting to work in our gardens, we're wanting to learn to sew again, we're wanting to do things that we can stretch our dollars. Because when the economy tanked, people had to start looking at how do we do that? How do we have a budget? How do we make these budgets work? What can we do to stretch dollars? And so it's kind of those things that we can then say, okay, we can help you and train you and show you ways, whether it's couponing, whether it's cooking for one, whether it's, cooking a large amount of food and breaking that down and putting it in the freezer so you have meals, so that you're not going out and buying food every day or going to McDonald's. So it's kind of being able to see what those trends are and what's coming down the pike, and being ready to pick those up and run with them and help people through those. Volunteers, we depend on volunteers, and volunteers are getting harder and harder to come by because people are busy. And it used to be that you could particularly find retirees that wanted to volunteer on a continuing basis, but with today's generation, they're more interested in doing that one-time short-term project and then moving on. So where we might be looking for volunteers to teach a class for a few months, it's harder to find that than if you want somebody to do one class at one time, and in large part because a lot of the seniors are going back to work themselves. So I would say that that's something that all organizations are looking for volunteers, but very much needed, and we depend on that because we have such a small staff. So that's one of the areas that we look for a lot as volunteers.
Thank you.
I think being innovative is also that we can allow our staff to be creative and think outside of the box. In the garden project, that we have a community garden and teaching, which kind of expanded into teaching people how to garden, how to set up their own garden. And we had one of our staff, in doing a lot of research on gardening, said, well, that one of the new things coming down the pike is aquaponics. Those aren't happening here in Indiana, but in some states they're starting to use aquaponics, which is a system of fish and plants together, growing, and they're organic, and so you're not using the ground, and the plants grow in the water. And so we sent him to get trained on how to build an aquaponics system, how it works. And so now we have an aquaponics system out back, and we will be starting to use that this summer. And as soon as we get heat in it, we'll have that for year round. So I think that, and some of that is also being able to work with funders and being able to make those connections and the rapport with funders, so that when you go to them and you say, we have this new project, that they know that things that you've done in the past have worked and have helped people, and so they're willing to look at those new projects and help you to get those started as well. So I think that you know, that being all tied together, that being able to be creative and think out of the box, and being able to work with funders and go and talk to them about new projects, and that, you know, that they're willing to help to get off the ground. All of those things are strengths. Weaknesses, sometimes I think that can be too creative, that try to get too many things going at once. That's probably my personal largest weakness, is I get too many ideas and want to do too many things, and people have to rein me in and say, okay, you gotta we can only do so much this year and there's only so much money. So so that's probably personally that's my biggest weakness. But you know, as far as the center goes, space is probably that one thing that holds us back. There's a lot of things that we could be doing, but with the, you know, there's only so much you can do in this amount of space. So I would say that that's our largest constraint. We do a lot. We do a lot in a little bit of space.
Another